Early today, just ahead of the planned negotiations between the United States and Iran this weekend, Donald Trump posted something that seemed to downplay a pretty critical detail. He said, quote, "The Iranians don't seem to realize they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways." That is, no cards except the one that has shut down 20% of the world's oil flow. That's I'd say a pretty important card, wouldn't you? And new data today showed how Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz is wreaking havoc on the American economy. Gas prices continue to spike as Trump's war continues and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. The price of regular gasoline in the United States jumped 25% from February to March, the highest monthly percentage increase on record. And other costs are rising sharply as well. The Consumer Price Index report showed that inflation jumped to 3.3% compared with the same time just last year. Not to mention that overall prices rose nearly a full percent over the course of March, the highest monthly gain since the peak of the post-pandemic inflation crisis in June of 2022. And with Iran leveraging the Strait of Hormuz, that economic pain isn't going away anytime soon. So for most presidents, this would be a moment where you hunker down with your national security team and your economic team and figure out how the heck to get out of this mess. That's what you would do. But that wasn't Donald Trump's approach, because tonight he spent his time at a $1 million per person fundraising dinner for his super PAC being held at his winery in Charlottesville, Virginia. Now, on his way, he answered some questions from reporters and once again repeated his completely made-up claims that Iran was militarily defeated and that the Strait of Hormuz would somehow open up automatically. And all of his fabricated bluster was even more bizarre, given there is a U.S. delegation led by his own vice president on its way to Pakistan for negotiations to end the war and open the strait, or that's their goal. And yet Trump doesn't seem to be at all bothered by the stakes.
What's your backup plan if there's no deal opens?
You don't need a backup plan.
You don't need a backup plan? I think you surely do need a backup plan. That's certainly putting a lot of pressure on the guy Trump has tapped to be the central player of these negotiations, very much on purpose. And there's no evidence to date that Vance is up to the task, or frankly interested in the task, to be honest, at all. Remember, this is what he said when asked about a key detail of the ceasefire on Wednesday.
I haven't been involved in that because I've been busy doing stuff in Hungary.
I haven't been involved in the war the guy I work with started because I've been busy campaigning for an authoritarian sweetheart in Hungary, as one does. So what exactly has J.D. Vance been involved in? Well, here's how he described his role in the talks so far.
Mr. Vice President, Karoline Leavitt said you played a key role in these talks. Could you help us understand some details about that role?
Well, I appreciate Carolyn saying that. My key role was I sat on the phone a lot. I answered a lot of phone calls. I made a lot of phone calls. And again, I'm happy about where we are.
Isn't that nice? He's happy Karoline Leavitt said that. Though it feels like quite a leap from making a lot of phone calls, doesn't it, to being the guy in charge of negotiating face-to-face with your geopolitical adversary? I don't know. Feels like a leap to me. Now, to add to the pressure on Vance, Trump seems pretty eager to put the responsibility for resolving this war entirely on his shoulders.
He's doing a great job, and he's working on the deal, right? How's that moving? Is it okay, the big deal? You see it happening? So if it doesn't happen, I'm blaming J.D. Vance. If it does happen, I'm taking full credit.
What did you tell J.D. Vance before he left, sir?
Well, I wish him luck. He's got a big thing. We'll find out what's going on.
Like he's an observer of the process of the war he started. What could go wrong? Joining me now are two people I spent a lot of time with when we were all a part of the team negotiating the Iran nuclear agreement that Donald Trump, of course, tore up. Rob Malley was President Obama's lead negotiator on President Obama's 2015 nuclear deal. And Admiral John Kirby is the former Pentagon spokesperson, former State Department spokesperson, and now an MS Now national security analyst. Rob, let me start with you. Just as Vice President Vance was taking off for Pakistan today, the guy he's supposed to be sitting across from in the negotiations, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, said that negotiations in Pakistan can't even begin until there's a ceasefire in Lebanon and Iran's assets are unblocked. I know, obviously, the Iranians are often speaking to the audience of people in their own country, but What did you make of that? I mean, is there a chance that they don't show up, or what do you think?
No, I think they will show up. I think there was a lot of maneuvering before they got there. Obviously, the Iranians know that getting a deal is more important to Trump than it is to them. I mean, this is just one of those classical cases where you look at both sides' best alternative to a negotiated agreement. For President Trump, it means the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the economy is in a tailspin, inflation is rising, his politics are down the tube. For Iran, yes, the war could continue, but they still control the Strait of Hormuz. They still survive. So they feel in a position of strength, so they maneuvered before the beginning. Hard to imagine that they would go there and embarrass the Pakistani hosts and not even have indirect talks with the U.S. We'll see if they're direct, but my suspicion is that they will occur tomorrow.
All right, well, we're going to be watching. Let me, Admiral Kirby, you have prepped secretaries of defense, secretaries of state, presidents. You've spoken yourself publicly during negotiations. I mean, so little of what Trump is saying right now really makes sense. Sometimes we try to say, maybe he means this, maybe he means that. And often it's like gobbledygook and we don't know what it means. I mean, he's threatened to end Iran's civilization. He says the strait will open on its own. What do you think? Because a lot of when you're prepping a president or a secretary of defense or state or speaking publicly from the government is thinking about how the people you'll be negotiating with are going to digest what you're saying. How do you think what he is saying is being digested? I mean, by the Pakistanis, by the Iranians, by others who were involved in this negotiating process?
I suspect the first reaction that they're having, Jen, is just continued distrust. I mean, remember the last time they agreed to sit down at the negotiating table with Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff, 2 attacks happened. So they feel like they've been burned in the past by all this rhetoric pre-negotiation and during negotiation. So I suspect that when they hear him talk like that, it just reinforces their level of distrust. And I think that probably helps, feed the bluster that you're hearing coming out of Tehran, the tough talk before they go in. They're not going into this. They're certainly going in, as Rob says, with a good degree of leverage, but they're also going to go in with a high degree of mistrust over this administration and their motives.
Rob, you alluded to this and sort of the Iranians, what they're watching, what they know, and what they see. I mean, everybody, when they're preparing for a negotiation, knows what kind of the dossier of the country they're negotiating with is, right? And they know that they've probably seen the economic data here at home, the impact of rising gas prices. They know the midterm elections are coming up. They know all these things. How do you think all of that factors into their dynamics?
So again, I mean, I do think you got to compare both sides. Every day the war goes on, and the U.S. and Israel strike Iran, it's diminishing marginal returns for how much they could do, how much more they're going to hit. Every day the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it hurts the American economy even more, and so it's increasing marginal returns. And so that imbalance is something that the Iranians are very well aware of. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't want a deal, because they are suffering, their economy is suffering, they're being battered, their infrastructure is taking a real hit. But what it does mean is that this won't, contrary to what President Trump has said, it won't be quick, it won't be easy, and it certainly won't end with Iran's capitulation.
Admiral Kirby, Trump, I know what I've said, not a lot of what he says doesn't make sense. I'm going to ask you about something he said, just because it's interesting. He said today that the Strait of Hormuz, if it isn't reopened, will be able to finish it off. Now, we don't know what he means by that. He's threatened military action before. We don't know that that's what they're going to do. But give us just a sense, as they sort of allude to, military action to retake the strait as opposed to negotiations, which I think everybody thinks is the preference here. What does that look like? What would that require in terms of manpower, in terms of resources?
Yeah. It would be a huge undertaking militarily. I'm not prepared to say that it couldn't be done militarily, but to do it and to sustain an opening, a safe opening of the strait, would require months and months of hard work by not just the United States military, but frankly, militaries in the region, and hopefully even militaries who aren't in the region, such as our European allies. I mean, just the convoys alone, Jen, I did that mission back in '88. That's time-intensive, ship-intensive. We had 500-plus ships back then. We have only 300 or so now. We would need help to do it, and the convoys are slow, and you've got to be constantly on your toes going through that narrow strait. But also you need eyes overhead. You're going to need constant intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets flying over the strait so you can see with an unblinking eye everything that's moving in that water 24/7. And you might even have to take militarily through land forces some of those islands on both sides of the strait that the Iranians have been able to use to launch attacks from. It's a huge undertaking. Again, not impossible militarily, but huge. And there's just really no way the United States could do it on its own for any sustained period of time.
Rob Malley, Admiral John Kirby, you both know a whole lot about a lot of things. Thank you so much for joining me on a Friday night as we all look ahead to the negotiations we'll be watching. I really appreciate it.